Welcome to episode 3 of Just About Managing, this new podcast, together with me, Chris Dingle, John Lloyd and Lee Smith. We hope you are doing very well. It's been like the wettest year ever here in the UK, but today it is sunny. All right, so let's bring some of that energy to guys today to this podcast. I have got the conch this week. So I am chairing, and next week it'll be John, and then it'll be Lee again, and round we go. We were just talking before this. We can't believe this is already episode 3. We are really grateful to all of you for helping us on this journey and for listening, and importantly, for passing us your feedback on how we're doing, right? It is very much appreciated. We are learning lots as we go. This will just morph and move, right? As we always do, like when we're trying stuff that's new. And we really do appreciate it. So all that lovely feedback from you guys, we were thinking, what should be the topic for today? And today's topic is feedback. Okay? So the value of feedback, when you got feedback, when you didn't, how do you know it's working? It's feedback. That topic, pretty big. So this could go anywhere. Let's find out where we go. Chaps, good morning. Who wants to go first?
Arm wrestle you for it, Lee.
All right, I'll let you win, John.
Okay, right. It's funny. We kind of have a pre-WhatsApp chat about what we're going to do, but as I said last week, neither of us know what the other person is going to say. So, which actually means you are on the spot as well. But that's the joy of actually going first, because I actually have actually made some thoughts through on this. Yeah, but
John, you got your crib sheet there then? Yeah, he does. Okay, all right. So this is going to be good, everybody. Right, so listen. Right, all right. Here we go.
So my first thought on this subject is that I think there's an inverse relationship between asking for feedback and the belief that you need feedback the longer people are in management or leadership. And some of that is, I think, by default, you believe that as you grow as a manager or a leader, that actually, I know my shit now, so I don't need to ask as much. But equally, I think as you become more senior, you unintentionally create these barriers where people feel more inhibited to give you feedback as well. And so, my thought process started going down what's the real art around, if I go back to early days of being a manager and really wanting that feedback, how am I keeping that going and actually making sure that I am keeping it real, man, in terms of understanding people's perceptions of me and actually how I can improve and develop myself. So that was my kind of ingoing assumption to this conversation, because I think that it's when I reflect upon sort of managers and leaders I've worked with in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, and particularly working with peers as well, and you see that that sense of how there's work, how they've evolved and how they take or consider feedback. It changes over that course of time. I don't know, guys, whether you've ever seen or perceived that.
I think I've not really thought of it in that way, John, but I think you're spot on. It's in different ways, as you say, isn't it? Those early stages, that feedback is the key to you. You mentioned it last week, I think, John, actually really well in the talk about first-time managers. But that early stage is that key of what I see in the mirror is not necessarily what people are seeing, what other people are seeing, in a positive way.
Yeah.
of actually not feeling imposter syndrome and seeing what people actually see you are doing well, but also those learning points. But I think it's a really interesting point that further you go through leadership. Not, I wouldn't say necessarily. It'd be interesting actually. I suppose it's different for different people. Are you less open to receiving feedback, particularly from those that are below you? Should we say, probably the wrong word, but below you in the organisation, than you would have been in the early stages of your career? It's a really interesting point actually.
But I think some of that is organisational hierarchy inhibits it rather than you're not open to it, because I think you get put on these almost like mythical plateaus, but they don't really exist, but people perceive they do, and I think that creates a form of barrier as well, unless you have a personality that's very open to it. But what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, that communication, which is ultimately what you get from feedback, is a two-way, not a one-way process. So, are you being perceived in the right way? But importantly, are you open and listening is important. But it's a two-way thing. There's a huge thing here that this is like scary. It is scary to give feedback, particularly for more senior people. Yeah. Fears around that, career limitation. Hierarchy bias is a real thing. It is a real thing. It is a challenge for anyone who's first-time manager, long-time manager, whatever it may be, because it's tough to give honest, candid, go-forward feedback. It's difficult to receive it. The bigger your role is, or whatever your role is, it can be difficult to action any of that feedback, and you can feel quite vulnerable. All right, but yeah, hierarchy bias around feedback is like huge. But the value of getting feedback from individuals, from a team, from an organisation, from your clients, from everybody is huge. It's just game changer in terms of you actually understanding how you operate. Yeah. So, but like hierarchy bias is like completely real. We were just chatting before this about different cultures and different things around the world, and there are huge inherent biases and different exposures and different experiences. They're really different for everybody, and they're also different. There's different kind of like challenges in terms of hierarchy. So I think that's massively important. But what I did want to do is I wanted to share a kind of like horror story of like feedback, of again, like getting this wrong, or just kind of like go. I remember this one, right? This is like, I was at JP then, we were putting in a new system, front office system. We were testing it, we were going to go live with it, the pressure was on, and there's this difference as well around when things are going well and when things are going badly. All right, so kind of got to, if you get more defensive, you get more. Certainly, I get more directive for my sins, like when the pressure's on. And there's a guy there, and I can remember his name. I'm not going to share it here, right? But I can remember the time, the experience, where I was sitting, what the conversation was, everything. Can't tell you at all what the name of the system is or any of that, because time flies by, and actually in time, that really doesn't matter what the situation is, but the engagement and the individuals is what personally I remember. And we were pushing hard to get this stuff done. And this guy gave me some unbelievable feedback at the right time that I've always remembered. And in a nice way, but a clear, directive way, he just said to me, Chris, so he was in my team, he said, just remember this next time, okay? When I was 7 and somebody asked me what I wanted to do with my life, I didn't say I wanted to do this. So bring us on the journey and listen, and what use your eyes and your ears as well as the whole thing, to read the room, get the feedback and think about it. Right, it was really interesting, and I really appreciate that guy telling me that at the time. And it took my black eye, and the system went in. And but more importantly, it changed. Importantly, after that, I reflected on it and then changed the way I operated with that person and that team. Right, and made sure
good on
we
him
kind of understood where we were going.
Yeah, and good on him for being so direct and actually in a consumable manner. But thanks to you, Chris, you've now wrecked my entire list of notes here. So I'm now back on
Sorry, John.
spur of the moment. But actually, the one thing that does spring to mind. So a number of years ago, we were going through. It's when I was doing my COO role, and we were going through a whole tranche of recruitment at the time, and so myself and my other regional COOs, we came up with the COO interview question bank. So just to be able to measure people consistently that we were going through and interviewing. And I don't take any credit for this one, but one of the great questions that the team came up with at the time was, the first question, it was a double question. So the first, and so obviously the recipient didn't know the second question was coming along. So the first question was, tell me about your management style. And of course, everyone talks about it. And then the next question was, how do you know? And it was surprisingly how often that it was a complete conversation killer. Because obviously what you want them to do is actually tell you about how they get feedback and going to your point, Chris, around communication modes, etc. But so often is you could see people kind of just completely froze, and actually they couldn't they really struggled to recover in terms of, okay, well, yes, I do this, or I regularly ask for feedback here, and so the ones that said, well, I just know, you knew you weren't going to hire them, but it's quite perceptive in terms of where you draw out between people who naturally do look for feedback or think about how they're getting feedback versus those that are just managing. And I found that quite fascinating. But so the other piece, which again I take no credit for, and it's one of my favourite lines that someone taught me again in my team, which is a way often when you say you're sat with your member of staff, and you say, you got any feedback for me? And even if you work with them, sometimes it's a bit, ooh. And it was just a softer way of asking exactly the same question, which is, what can I change to make it better for the way you work with me? So it's just softening the toning of it, and actually you're opening yourself up a bit more and inviting criticism as such. But so, hey, Lee, I've done a lot of talking. I'll shut up.
I think again, it opens up so much thought process just you talking there, John, again, because you go, I think there's so many different layers you could go to with the feedback process side of things, which is, for me, is how do you give and receive feedback, and what do you do with it? So, to your point, Chris, earlier, I think that's great that somebody felt able and safe enough to give you that feedback, and that you actually then had the awareness and self-reflection to go away and use it.
Oh, I wish it had been because I'd created an open channel. They were just annoyed. So I'm not going to pretend. However, I've got a better story where I was more proactive when I was a bit older. However, I can't take credit for that. Don't. It wasn't that. But thanks, Lee. All right, when I need someone to sell something, you're my man. You'll be like, yep. But no, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
well, I'll give you credit for the second part then, Chris, is the fact that once you'd had that, you took it away and self-reflected and said, right, I'm going to do something with it, as opposed to having a mindset of going, well, that's just one person saying it. I'll ignore it because I know best, because I'm the leader. And so I think there's that piece of how do you use it? What do you do with it? But then it does come back to, as you said there, John, then, the core to a lot of it, particularly if you're asking people directly, is what environment have you created for those individuals, for that team, to be able to share? Have you given your own vulnerability up in a way to go,
Yeah.
I'm now ready to receive this, and I'll give you feedback. And I think that, again, this is why there's so many different layers to it, is how you use it and what you do with it. We do, with one of the organisations I work with at the moment in Kianis as leadership development, there's a program, or part of the program there, which is feedback as fuel, which again is not, when you look at it in detail, it's not rocket science, but we don't look at it in that way. How do we really give or receive feedback and then properly use it to fuel us, both as individuals and as an organisation? Because it can be so powerful. And then the other dynamic for me on the feedback piece, again, we could dig into each of these in loads of detail, but the other key piece for me then is, and again I'd go back to Canis on this, and the way that we do it is how you get that feedback, or where you get that feedback from. In that, when we thinking back to our sort of end of year reviews and things at times, you'd have feedback that came in there, and your manager would likely give you that feedback, but then not necessarily give you anything to do with it. It's just, here's your feedback, here's your review, now go off and carry on. Now, some of those managers may then have given you that support, or that continuous improvement plan, or that coaching support around it to drive you forward. But the other piece for me then is that bit of going, actually there's two levels of that feedback, in that there's the level of feedback for those below you in your team. How do they perceive you? Are you living the values of the organisation? Are you giving them that safe space in there? And then the second set is that, what's the feedback of your peers and those above you in there? Yeah. And not mixing the two in a way, because they're two very differential sets. And it may be something else we talk about with regard to managing up versus managing down potentially in the future. But I think it can be easy to just get 360 feedback and go, right, here you go, here's all the feedback. But I think to differentiate the two, when you're combining that with looking at how your self-awareness, your self-development, your team's development is most effective, for me, I think is critical in there.
Yeah, that whole dynamic, particularly when you're talking about receiving the feedback from your bosses, is like interesting. One of the most scary things, though, is actually to give feedback to more senior people, right, yourself, right? So actually, if you want to create an open culture where people are able to talk to you, this is where the rubber really hits the road on like being that kind of like role model leader, and being brave enough, but also emotionally intelligent enough, and respectful, but being able to get a result to speak to your boss or bosses or different people. That's hugely important, because if you don't do it, how can you really expect anybody else to do it? It's like tough. So out of those times, there's a really lovely tool that I learned when I was at UBS around like difficult conversations, called the Power of Three. Okay, and that I personally think is like a brilliant tool. It's like, there's a way of describing it as like the shit sandwich, right? But it's much more simple than that. This is about when you know something needs to happen and you know you need to go and have that conversation. It's about first, out of the three bits of the conversation, you can say you need to be assertive. You're not being passive. You're not being aggressive. You're being assertive. You're having a two-way respectful conversation. You're part of that team. They're part of yours. You're part of theirs. So you can say you feel vulnerable about doing it, but then you need to have the conversation. You need to give the feedback. You need to think about it. So personally, the teams that I played my best parts in, the roles that I could do, my natural skills, I was able to use them in that team. And my manager or managers would respect what I could bring to the organisation. And, that would be kind of like structural thought and kind of like, descriptions and like visionary type stuff. Whereas other people would be better suited to the execution and then kind of like the engagement pieces with teams, right? So actually, the real power of feedback is releasing that diversity and including the other people in the team, including yourself, because the team doesn't stop with you. This includes everybody, right? So I think that role modelling is huge. That is really tough. But if you expect others to do it, you've got to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And make
agreed.
that difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's another piece again. I know we talked about it last time with regard to that support when you move into management, that training. And I don't recall myself. I don't know whether you have, and unless we've done it through leadership development programs again at times that we've been on. But I've certainly never had proper support on how to give and receive feedback. With regard to, again, we learn it as we go along, but to really use it in a powerful way and take it in a powerful way. And I think there's a skill behind it, definitely. And like you said, Chris, as well, particularly with giving that feedback to seniors in there. But have they created the environment to give it again? It comes back to the safety piece again, the psychological safety. But I think there's a gap in there again for how do you really give, receive, and use feedback.
I can feel a side podcast series coming on here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a really, you know him, John. I do. Roger Noon, fantastic in the culture space. And maybe we could reach out to Roger and get him to talk to us about speak up culture. Right? He ran some experiments with the team when we were in India around the different component pieces. So maybe we can reach out to him and get him to come along. If we get if we get feedback, guys out there, if you get feedback, we want some more feedback. We want Roger. Then we could talk to Roger about speak up. Right? He's got what's really nice out of that actually is that the model is quite simple and it's quite easy to understand, and then you can actually score the model. And then you can create targeted actions to kind of like work on it, and that was part of that success. Is like, but Roger's just a genius, isn't he, John, in this space?
Yeah, isn't he now Dr. Rogered?
Sorry, Dr. Roger. So if you would like, he's still Roger, but we could call him Doctor. He's not Roger though. He's definitely Roger.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants Dr. Roger, you're right. Then yes. Let us know and we'll reach out to him and see if he'd like join us to talk about Speak Up. That would be really good. Yeah. All right, so Great conversation, guys. Really, really good. Now, in terms of feedback, I've got some feedback that's just popped in. And Lee, you'll recognise this kind of feedback explicitly being a Nottingham Forest fan. So we've got some feedback here.
That's a whole of a podcast, by the way, talking about Nottingham Forest.
That has come in, and so I'm just going to read it because, the feedback, we need to make sure that we are open and we're listening. All right, so there's a statement that's just come out on X just now, and it says, 3 bald guys, the 3rd podcast already. We warned Spotify that one of the support team was a Luton fan, but they did not change him. Our patience has been tested multiple times. We will consider our options.
Oh dear, don't. I'm embarrassed, Chris, for them at the moment. There's work needed there, definitely. There's definitely some feedback needed to be taken and utilised and built on there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that leads us on to topic number 2. This week we thought we'd just share a travel experience. So as John said earlier, we don't know where this is going to go. Could be anywhere, literally, boom. So, Lee, let's start with you on a travel story.
Oh, don't start with me. I was racking my brains because we only sort of agreed on this one last night, didn't we? So I was thinking, right, what's a good travel story? And I tried to keep it work related again on this. But it was one of the best experiences, one of the most unique experiences as well. And it was when, again, a lot of this revolved. So I didn't travel a huge amount with work, but revolved around India. And it was the first time I went out to India. to work with the team there. I think it was, and one of the team members there, who's still part of the team actually in the team I first started in, and I will give a name check to him, is Manju. So Manju Radha, and myself and another colleague were out there, and we'd done some training with this team, and we said, where do we go? We're out there for 4 weeks. We said, where do we go at a weekend? What can we do? And the team said, where you want to go? We were in Pune, and they said, where you should go is take a trip out to Mahabaleshwar, which is sort of it's within Maharashtra still, near Pune, but it's sort of a tourist attraction. There's some fantastic. I mean, if you're there, go and see it, because there's some brilliant places around there, and the scenery is just unbelievable. So anyway, so we said, right, we'll take a trip to Mahabaleshwar. Now, for those in the UK, hopefully you'll resonate with this, in that when we think about taking a day trip, it's probably half an hour down the road or an hour down the road. When you're in India and you take a day trip, it's very different in there. So Manju said, we'll have a day trip to Mahabaleshwar. So, brilliant. So myself and Joe got ready in the hotel, and we waited outside the hotel. We're in the Meridian Hotel in Pune. Very grand place there. This is going back 20 years probably. And we're waiting out the front, and Manju turns up in the taxi that he's ordered for us, which is called Cool Cabs. And it's a blue and white Fiat Panda.
With no aircon.
With no aircon. And bearing in mind, this is 20 years ago on the roads in Pune. And we then sit in this Fiat Panda, and don't get me wrong, again, the guy who drove us there was fantastic. And we basically spent the whole day in this Fiat Panda, because he then drove us to Mahabaleshwar, out of Pune, through all these pothole roads, through all these sort of packed roads as you came out. There'd be cars that were tipped on the side that had gone down the ditches a little bit, and we're rattling along in this Fiat Panda for 4.5 hours to get to Mahabaleshwar. This guy in the Fiat Panda then takes us around the various tourist attractions there, which again are breathtaking at times. I've still got some brilliant photos of that and some great memories. And we rattle around all of these places, and then we travel back 4.5 hours again in this Fiat Panda. So we must have spent, and again, Manju will probably know this better than me, but we must have spent 15 hours in a Fiat Panda that day. And it was, like I say, one of the best days from an attraction perspective, and seeing the scenery, one of the most uncomfortable days from a day trip in a car perspective. So I think that the learning for me is, particularly if you're visiting somewhere like India that's so vast, when the team say, or when somebody there says, we're going to go on a day trip, be prepared that it might not be half an hour down the road.
I feel that story, Lee. Wow. I need like an inflatable cushion for your bottom for that. Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh dear. Do you want me to go?
See those pictures, dude. You should share those.
Share them.
Send them over on WhatsApp after. That sounds
Definitely.
great.
There's a brilliant picture, actually, just to share quickly. There's a brilliant picture where I've got, and I'll try and dig it out, where it's the scenery on the top of one of these mountain tops in Mahabaleshwar, and there's this fantastic scenery, and planted right in the middle of this blue and white Fiat Panda. it's brilliant. I'll try and dig that out for you.
Yeah, we should put it on the video. We should put it on the podcast.
We should. Yeah, definitely. Let's try and share it.
Did you have hair in that photo?
Only a touch, just there.
Yeah, we might have to Photoshop it out just for authenicity's sake.
It won't recognise me.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Oh, John.
Following the same theme, so I decided to focus it on work travel, and obviously discounted a lot of stories that I couldn't say on the podcast. The one that made me chuckle was, so my first boss at HSBC was a lady called Kath Lloyd-Jones, and yeah, no surprise, similar surname, not related whatsoever. And so probably about a month into joining, we had our first business trip out to Kuala Lumpur, and we deliberately sat on opposite sides of the plane, and partway through the flight, I was sat there eating rubbish, watching some crap movie, and the air steward came over and said, "Excuse me, sir, your wife's gone to sleep. Can you tell me whether she'd like breakfast or not?" And I said, no, I have no idea. It's my boss, not my wife. And she was, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And so and didn't think anything of it. Great business trip. Learned a lot on the trip. Came back, and then a few weeks later, we went to visit the team in Paris, and we got all the way there. We had a day in the office, and then went to check in at the same time at our hotel, and we got to check in, and it was one of these hotels with 2 reception desks. We're standing next to each other, and here's your key, Mr. Lloyd, and the woman's on the reception talking to Kath, and she said, "But we've cancelled your room because we thought you were husband and wife, so we've got you down as sharing one room." I was like, oh God! It's like, and because we both instantly said, no, we're not married, So fortunately, they did have another room they could give her, but that could have been a little bit awkward. But there you go. That's my short but brief. But I still makes me chuckle today thinking about it.
Excellent. It's almost as difficult as checking into a hotel as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, to be honest.
Yeah, I hate to think of the filtered stories. There we go. Can't tell this one. Can't tell that one. Can't tell this one. So this one goes back to when I was in the Middle East for me, and so I was based in Dubai, and the Saudi government was looking for Saudi Arabia to really come to the fore, to diversify away from oil, and the organisation had a brokerage footprint in Saudi, but we also had one in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi, and it clearly wasn't working, right? The revenue wasn't high, and the headcount was kind of growing, and it was just weird. But the relationship was really interesting, right? Because you couldn't just say, "I'm coming to Saudi," because you actually have to be invited. Okay. And then, important. Now, this isn't that long ago. I was thinking, how far ago was this? Yeah, I still didn't have hair. But it was in the mid-teens, right? So it was 2015, 16 in that window. But just so everybody understands the kind of transformation in Saudi and this whole Saudi 2030 thing, the right for women to drive in Saudi only happened in 2017. So this is quite a significant period of change in the Middle East and with Saudi. So we're going to go there. But that's kind of the environment, right? You have to get invited in. You have to be careful about what you do. Long and short of it is we're allowed to go. We're allowed to go into Saudi. We've got 2 days to do a review and recommendations of the brokerage business front to back. What are we going to do? Blah, 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 blah. And we get on the plane and we go, and we arrive there, and we are walking around the malls and stuff, and everybody is very respectful, different zones, everything. We're then shepherded into HSBC, and I'm there with another guy, and he's really keen on cultural, making sure everything's right, etc. And saying, right, well, let's not ask for anything, let's not do anything that's out of turn, out of sequence, whatever. Let's make sure we make absolutely the right first impression. So we're sitting down outside the CEO's office of the bank, the Saudi, super senior person, really, really important. Everybody's P's and Q's everywhere. So, oh my goodness, right, we've got to make the right impression, That guy is absolutely desperate to go to the bathroom. So he's going, "Oh, I can't go. I said, "Look, it's fine, just go, because then you then you can come back and then we'll go in." So lo and behold, off he goes, and literally 2 seconds later, the door opens and in I go, but he's not there. So we go in, and I'm kind of using my feedback, sensory, spider sense, kind of whatever, thinking, right, don't say this, don't do that, whatever. very respectful, all this kind of stuff, and we're doing whatever. And we sit down, and the guy says, oh, would you like a coffee? And the thing is, yes, you will. Right, so yes, I'll say, yeah, I'll have a coffee, right impressions, whatever. So we've got special Arabic coffee. We do this. Would you like that? So I don't know if you guys know, but like Arabic coffee is incredibly strong, right? Real like flavour, real whatever. So, but it's like fine. So the coffee comes, we're having the coffee, the conversation's going really well. When we're just getting to the point where we're going to go, right, you definitely got green light, in you go. This is what you're going to do. We're going to do whatever. And we're just getting to that point. We've got a really great conversation. And the other chap comes in. He's back. He's finished in the bathroom. He comes in. He goes, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm coming up. Like, sit down." And bearing in mind that there's this kind of like deep culture, and they go, "Oh, can I have a coffee, please? Would you like one? Would you like a coffee?" And he goes, "Yes, I'll have a vanilla skinny latte, please." And you can just see like the tumbleweed virtually like through the room, and it was not the best. But that guy, who I'm not going to name check, definitely not, was awesome on the trip, right? Did everything that we needed to do. I remember, you have those trips where you've got, you stay up late, you take all your notes down, you then work out a strategy, you do whatever. And yeah, really proud of that. But like amazing, amazing experience. I'd love to go back there and see what it looks like now. I can't imagine it's just so different. But yeah, bonkers.
That's brilliant. Yeah, the classic example of read a room. But yeah, I'm sure there's then at the time of you cringing versus internally laughing at the same time, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was certainly funny when we were like, out of that room. It's like, wow. Okay, all right. So we're at the end of the podcast. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of Just About Managing. Please remember to follow the podcast, comment, and importantly, give us feedback. We really do appreciate it. We are listening, and we'd love to talk to you and listen to you like next week. This has been John Lloyd, Lee Smith, and I'm Chris Dingle, and you've been listening to the Just About Managing podcast.